Brad, I think the best evidence of the chaos in both of our lives today is that you FaceTimed me and I'm sweatily riding on a bike home, and you're calling from just a sea of boxes. And I think we can explain to everyone what the situation was on both of those, and they'll see that we're both operating at peak efficiency this week in terms of our creativity and our workload.
Yeah, that's right, because as you are over there madly getting ready for Comic-Con International, which is this coming weekend, I'm moving into my new studio space. The floor you will see over there has held up, even with all those boxes. We have not had a cave-in yet, but it has taken me 2 days, and thank goodness for my sons, who both worked their butts off hauling stuff from the storage space over into here. One of which had an extra day's duty, just again finishing up that next Monday. Thank goodness for them, because there's a lot of boxes just sitting around now that it's just got to get worked through to get it back into where it goes.
Yeah, and then, but making progress. I'm currently looking at the backside of your studio, and the bookshelves are already filling up nicely. The space, once everything is in, it's going to be gorgeous.
It really is.
I'm happy for you as a friend. You are going to be walking into a psychologically professional space. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not that the other one wasn't, but this is going to be really nice.
No, it's going to take till October to get it to where it needs to be. But once I get there, I'll have to do a video studio tour, because it is going to be nice.
And to give context on my side of things, one of the reasons why when Brad FaceTimed me, I was on my bike, was as I go to Comic-Con, I sort of use it every year as sort of a mental mnemonic to remind myself to get my car serviced. So, because if I'm going to drive to Comic-Con, I might as well get my car serviced, and then it's a reminder every year to get my car serviced. So I drop it off at the place, and a guy goes, all right, I'll give you a call later on today. And I pop the back of my Honda Odyssey van, grab my bike out, and start biking home. And the guy starts chuckling to himself, and he's like, I go, what? He goes, I just never have anyone grab a bike out of their van and just bike themselves home. I'm like, we live in Southern California. It's not like I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska in the winter. Why wouldn't people bike home, you know?
It's gorgeous over there. Yeah, of course you'd want to bike home, for crying out loud.
Although it's 90 degrees right now, so when Brad FaceTimes me, old in shape over here was huffing and puffing as Brad calls in.
I've already started to sweat through this T-shirt, and I've got the air conditioner going over there. It's just it's been nuts. But you know what? We've got a great weekend to look forward to. And we're going to be doing the live show. We'll have lots of stories for that. Next episode, we'll tell you how that went, and of course, we're going to be hanging out at San Diego. Everything up until Thursday when I get onto the plane is going to be a misery. But Thursday night when I touch down in San Diego, that part I'm really looking forward to.
Amen. My day today is chaos. That's all I can describe it as. It's a list, 100 things long before I leave for Comic-Con. But being at the show, sometimes people ask me why I still do it. Sometimes you ask me why I still do it. And the money's good, but also the joy of it. I still get a childlike joy going to Comic-Con. It's fun for me. I'm excited to be there. I'm excited to be there with my friend Brad this year. It's going to be so fun. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to a chaotic but joy-filled episode of ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, surprised that he changed his bio. He didn't run that by me. And the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
Well, again, all my stuff is missing. I pulled an old sheet out of a drawer and was hoping for the best. And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I would love the fact because Brad has been in that studio now for what, 10, 12 years?
10 years.
10 years. I would love it if the script for the intro to the show that you pulled out, he's like, and I'm Brad Geiger, cartoonist of Greystone Inn, and you're listening to Webcomics Weekly.
Yeah, just how far back does that go?
I mean, to be fair, I'm looking around your office. It's a lot, Brad. It's a lot of. The word hoarder is not being thrown out, But let's just say I won't throw out the word hoarder, but I will say it looks like you have thrown nothing out in 10 years.
I might be able to throw a couple of things out. In fairness, my boys were as they were sweating their butts off getting this stuff in. That the word hoarder was used once or twice. But listen, I'm going to tell you what I told those little shits, and it's this. That's not hoarding. That's 20 years of being active as a comics professional. You pick a few things. Most of that stuff is boxes of books that I need for my stock. Some of that stuff is original art that's got to go up on the walls. A bunch of books some of the books people sent me because I gave them some advice on a Kickstarter, or I picked up because I liked it. This is just the accumulation of 20 years worth of comics working.
Yep, and you've wisely held on to that instruction manual for the iPhone 1 that you had, so it's all there. All the hits are there, everybody.
I did hold on to a lot of that stuff, and to my credit, it went out. It was a good excuse to clear some of that stuff out. It did go to the garbage, but there were a lot of user manuals for equipment that I haven't touched in years. That I do have to admit is still probably another couple of garbage bags worth of stuff that needs to get thrown
Listen,
out.
I say it all with love because I do it myself. We all do it. Only in a move do you realize that you have held on to stuff for emotionally the dumbest reasons. So anyway, I'm going to jump us right into our first question. It comes in over at patreon.com/ComicLab, and it goes like this. Hi, Brad and Dave. I took your advice some time ago and stopped concentrating on Patreon and shifted focus to creating good work. My comics slowed down due to an extended bout of family illness, totally fair, but now I'm back in the swing of things, selling my comic zine once a month at a local alternative night market and posting regularly to social media, webtoons, and I'm even in the process of building a website dedicated to my comics. My question is, when will it be appropriate to reboot my Patreon? Or should I steady the course and continue down a direct selling route? My zines and prints are doing very well every month on the one night of selling, but I want to step out from Pro-Am into pro status. Keep preaching the gospel of comics. It never gets dull. Brad, what is our answer for this question asker who has taken our advice, Brad, and put his Patreon on hold while he works on his comic?
So let me see if I heard you right. If I were to paraphrase that, you talked me out of a mistake, and now I want to start making that mistake again as quickly as possible. Am I hearing that right? You told me to stop doing this thing, and I did for a hot minute, and now I want to get back to doing it as quickly as possible. And
Brad, I took your advice and I put the fire out on top of my roof of my house, but I'd like to start a small couch fire in my living room. What is your thoughts on that?
I'd like to start playing with matches again. And yeah, I'm gonna tell you that you're making a huge mistake, and I almost find it like I don't know that I should try to talk you out of it, because it's going to be impossible. You seem to be hell-bent on making this mistake. And if I went back and looked, Dave, because I was intrigued, so I went back to the episode. It's episode 244, which was called Understanding Passive Revenue Streams. And this was a person that he was very upset because he had been posting 30, he had done 30 updates, and he only had 3 Patreon backers. And he said, how can this be? I've done 30 updates and I only have 3 Patreon backers. And I went back and looked, and those 30 updates were spread out over 3 years, right? He had a little spate here, a little spate there, a little spate in the next place. And what we said to him was, I'm not sure what's more surprising. I said, I'm not asking myself why you only have 3 Patreon backers. I'm asking myself how the hell you managed to get 3 Patreon backers, right? And we talked about, that whole "it's Friday and I'm not famous yet" syndrome, okay? And we gave this person 4 bits of advice. Focus on your writing.
Yep.
Focus on making every page significant and have a certain amount of standalone nature, right? So that even if I'm coming in on page 74, I kind of have an idea of what's going on. And that's very difficult to do in a long form comic. And I acknowledge that. But if you're building an audience, you have to keep a mind open to the fact that people are coming in on that 74th page, and there's got to be something for them. You've got to build these pages in such a way that that happens. Third piece of advice was post consistently. And the fourth piece of advice we gave him was to lay off Patreon for 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so now that you have very kindly given us the review of the advice we gave him, what has happened in the interim, Brad? Stepped away from Patreon, yes. What about the other suggestions that we made?
Well, he made it about 11 months because he posted. And by the way, I did a little research on this. I went over to his Patreon and he made a public Patreon post. So I read it that said, the ComicLab guys gave me some hard advice and I'm taking it. And he said to his Patreon, I'm going to lay off Patreon for 2 or 3 years. That was 11 months ago. That was in September.
Oh, bless. Okay, yes.
He made it 11 months. And by the way, I'm going to tell our question asker to put your phone down because I know right now your thumbs are madly texting us saying, I'm not talking about right now. I'm talking about in the future, how to get ready in the future so I'm prepared when it comes. But Mike, what I'm going to tell you is if you're thinking even this much about Patreon, you took your eye off the ball. You couldn't even make it 11 months without thinking about Patreon. And you're doing this night market thing and selling zines and stuff, which I may be wrong about this, but I think if you counted up and you gave yourself, like, let's say, what's a good wage to give oneself for one's work? 25 to make it easy, $25 an hour, let's say.
Oh, sure.
Do you think I'm right about that?
Sure.
Okay, so if you took and added up the hours you're putting into creating these zines and printing them and stapling them and getting them ready, and then the hours you're spending standing there out at this night market, and if you totaled up your money that you're bringing in and subtracted the cost of the materials, the printing cost, the stapling, and your hours that you put into it, I don't think that this is a good use of your time. If it is, keep doing it, but before you decide to keep doing it, I want you to do the math on this. So so let's bring this up to date, Dave. He did take that. He posted from September when he wrote us. He posted consistently until about December, when I think that's when that family health emergency happened. Okay.
Sure.
Since then, he's that break was in December. So far in 2023, he's posted. Are you ready for this?
Sure.
4 pages.
Right.
4 pages over 6 months. You are not in any place to be thinking about a Patreon. All right. This should be the furthest thing on your mind. And I'm not saying this to make you feel bad, but I'm saying this to be realistic because there's so much that we talked about in that episode 244. There's so much that it's taking your attention away from where it should be. It's making you probably feel bad about yourself because you've only got 3 Patreon backers, and that makes you feel lousy because it's like, well, why aren't I doing better? And it's not about that right now in your career. You've done all of 50 pages as a cartoonist in this project, and maybe you worked on something before that. I don't know. You've done all of 50 pages. You are a beginner. You've got so much to learn. And the more you got your eye on Patreon, the more you're not paying attention to those things you've got to learn.
Yeah, I agree with this. I want to pause for a second just to reinforce that this is all being said with love, because we get it. The bigger picture is you want to be a pro, and there is nothing wrong with that. That is a worthwhile goal to be shooting for. What Brad is saying, and what I am co-signing, is that it's still not yet the time. And in fact, even thinking about planning for Patreon right now is robbing you of some of your creative hours that you could be using for writing and working on your craft and drawing. So while there's no harm in sort of daydreaming the next stage, and even Brad and I do this, is daydream the next stage of our careers. There's no harm in that. But by actually putting rubber to the road and doing actual planning or actual graphics for your Patreon or actually setting up tiers for Patreon, even if you're not using it, you're taking time away from the creative work, the 10,000 hours that you have to put in to build up that comic, build up that audience. Or else what's going to happen is you're going to stumblingly be doing both again badly. You'll be doing Patreon badly and a comic badly. And that's, again, said with love, not with any sort of criticism. I get it. There are so many stages in my life that I have wanted whatever the next stage is. And it's kind of the human condition is the aspirational thing that makes us look to whatever the next thing is. Like, oh, Brad, I got a PS4. Got to get that PS5. I get it. Listen, I also want a PS5. But no, I actually don't. I'm fine with my PS4. I don't know why I said that. But anyway, well, go ahead, Brad. You jump in.
Well, and here's the danger is that you're at the beginning stages and you've got a lot. I took a look at your comic for a little bit this morning because I was waiting for the Verizon tech to come over and get my new hookup set up. Here's a few things I noticed. Number one, you're making the crossbar eye rule mistake. You're doing crossbar eye wrong. It's making
and real quick, Brad, just for a reminder, what is the crossbar eye mistake?
The crossbar eye says that you only use the crossbar eye. That's the one with the serifs. It's got the little crossbars on top and bottom. You only use that for the personal pronoun I and any abbreviations that include that, like I, I'm, I've, I'd, I'll, those kinds of things. For all others, even if there's a word that starts the sentence that begins with the letter I, you don't use the crossbar I, you use the sans serif I, that's the one without any serifs, in all other cases.
Right.
You're making the crossbar I rule. That's Comics 101. That tells me that you're not taking the time to learn about the craft of comics, right? And that's okay, because you're only 50 pages in, and this is exactly where you're supposed to be. My point is, it's going to take you,
it's the learning.
By dividing up your attention, it's going to take you so much longer to get good than it should that it's a detriment to you. Here's another thing. I read your stuff. You need to learn how to use a comma, my friend. Your word balloons are very difficult to read because you are not applying basic punctuation, okay? That's a big, big problem. Anything that it trips up the reading experience takes your reader out of that trance that you're trying to put them in, right? And again, the pages being standalone, that's very tough. The pages that I read, and these are the pages that you've just posted this past week, heavy reliance on cliffhangers, which is, again, something you can mete out every once in a while. But reading a comic that page after page you're always relying on that cliffhanger is not a great reading experience, which is to say you're making all the mistakes that I would expect someone to make at your beginning level of doing comics. You should be buying Nate Picos's book on comics lettering and reading it cover to cover, right? You should be learning about basic grammar and how to use a comma. You should be forcing yourself to write those pages in such a way that they hang together as an individual reading. All of those things you've got to do. But if you're sitting there obsessed about a Patreon, you said you were going to make it 2 or 3 years, you made it 11 months before you're writing us about the Patreon. If you keep taking your eye off the ball, it's going to take you. By the way, here's the good thing. I think you could be really good. I think at some point, if you keep at it, I think you've got the potential to be a very, very good cartoonist. But if you keep taking your eye off the ball, it's going to take you twice as long as it should.
Yeah, and so that you really hear what Brad just said. What he's saying is not unique criticism to you. It's criticism we would give to ourselves starting out too, which is these are all the natural steps of learning. So it's not like you're behind the curveball or that you're not on the right path. You are on the right path. The mistakes that you're making are the mistakes of someone who's done 50 pages of comics or 50 plus pages of comics. So all of this is to be expected. You're doing the right stuff. Brad's saying, keep at it. Keep doing it. Keep the focus there. You're on the right path. You're doing the right things. You're got all the makings of a great cartoonist. It's not yet time for Patreon. So stay the course and put in those hours before turning your attention to Patreon.
Yeah. Now, so I'm not being unfair. I'm going to actually answer the question. When can you start up the Patreon? Just because I know it's going to bug you. Here's 2 things you'll know that it's time to start your Patreon. Number one, you've got a readership of upper tens or hundreds of thousands of followers, right? Like I would start it at maybe 40 or 50,000 up towards there.
Quantify that. What do you mean by that? How will you know?
Here's what I mean.
Okay.
Because once you get a huge, large readership, then you could put up a Patreon where you say, where it's a support-based Patreon. And you can say, you know, hey, support this comic for $3 a month. Right? We already know that having a $1 a month tier is a terrible idea, but we've been saying that for 5 years. But okay, $3 a month. If 1% of a 50,000 reader audience chimes in at that $3 buy-in, you're doing really well. So that's one way that you could start a Patreon, is when you've got a huge audience. And I'm saying, I'm spitballing. Don't take me to, don't write down 50,000 like it's a magic number. It's not. It's literally the first thing that came into my head. But what I'm trying to say is a large number. That's your first, that's one time that you could say, okay, maybe it's time for me to start doing a Patreon. Here's the second option that you've got. You have a much smaller readership, but they are passionate about what you do.
I'm glad you. Yes.
Yeah, because this is your two options, and this is the difference between a support-based Patreon and a exclusive content-based Patreon. Because if you've got a smaller audience that's passionate about what you do, then you set up an exclusive reward that they're passionate to get. You put it at a higher level, and because they're passionate about your stuff, they will buy in to get it, right? Those are the two that if you really want to know the answer to your question, when can I start my Patreon? It's when you fulfill one of those two options. You either have a huge audience and
a huge general audience. Yep.
Yes. Or you have a smaller audience, but they're passionate about what you do and they are willing to go along with an exclusive reward.
And I will just underline a fact that Brad put out there, which is that 1% of activating 1% of any audience in some respects is optimistic. Sometimes it's 0.5%. Sometimes it's less than 0.5%. So the idea that like if you have 50,000 readers, I'm going to be able to activate 50,000 readers to Kickstarter or Patreon or my new book or coming out to a Comic-Con or whatever it is. The truth of the world is most of those people are, if you want to look at it ideally, on the path to becoming a super fan, right?
Right.
But most of them are just casually enjoying free content that they're getting online. And we're all that. I'm that person, even on subreddits for comics or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram for comics, is that most cartoonists, I casually and passingly enjoy their work and never the twain shall meet. I'm never going to buy their book and I know it. So I just want to reemphasize with Brad is that right now you're thinking like, oh, I just need to get to that 50,000 because then I'll have, you're trying to work out the hard math. It's always underwhelming how many people you can actualize into spending money. And so as Brad said, the best thing is to keep the course, work on your craft. And then as the audience builds and builds, you'll be able to actualize a percentage of a percentage, but be able to make pro-am and ideally pro living eventually on it.
Absolutely. So now that we've kind of tied that up, let's take a quick question from another $5 Patreon backer. And it goes like this. Comes in from our friend Zane, who says, Patreon is great for funding long-running projects and creators with a regular release of content. Do you think that Patreon can also work for a short-term standalone project as well? I've got a project that I've been assembling that would only give me about a year or two of content. Gotcha. However, I know that Patreon is a slow-building platform. Am I making more work than it's worth by taking short-term projects to Patreon, or should I just lean further into the experimental aspect of what I'm doing and not worry about getting anything back out of the project? So, Dave, the question here is, this person doesn't have like an ongoing project. It's something that'll maybe be going on for a year. Do they set up a Patreon or not? Okay,
so let's look at this by walking through and talking through the wrong way to do it. And then I think by me doing that, it'll set up Brad to explain the right way to do it, okay? Yeah. So let's say you create a Patreon just for this 1 year long project. Let's say the The project is called Pistoleros, and it's about cowboys, right? And you've got the comic Pistoleros, but it's a short story. It's going to be 64 pages, 128 pages, doesn't matter. It's only going to run for a year, right? And so you're like, guys, there's a new Patreon. It's just for Pistoleros. You're going to love it. Let's do it, right? And let's say in success, you manage to actualize and monetize a percentage of your audience. They're jumping in on the Patreon for Pistoleros. That's great. Okay. But the story's now wrapping up. It's a year later. It's wrapping up. Okay. So now here are your options. You have those people signed up to a Patreon, right? Now, whatever the new project is, you've got to get them to recognize what's happening. The Patreon that you've previously signed up for is now going away, or at the very least, it's going defunct, or it's going to go quiet. So what I need you to do is I need you to go over to my new Patreon for Happy Bunnies. It's my new project starting, and I need you to redo the process, right? And as we all know from gym memberships to any kind of subscription, it's getting people to do the initial action that's the hardest, right? So asking them to then do a whole new set of instructions when the project ends is you're setting yourself up for trouble. So I don't think you want to do a project-based, also, and separate from any of that, by the time you get up ahead of steam with getting people to sign up for Pistoleros, it's probably winding down and ending. It's going to take you a hot minute to get the audience to be passionate about it and sign up for it. And right as that starts to happen, you're in your third act and the story's winding down, and now the whole Patreon's ending. So Brad, what do you think would be the better way to do this?
Yeah, this is a great time to address that thing that we've talked about in the past, which is, should I set up my Patreon based on my creation or based on me as an artist? And what it sounds like to me, that this is a tailor-made situation to set up your Patreon revolving around you as an artist. Okay. So then when this thing is done, you can just revamp those rewards to include the next thing that you're doing. And so it's not about this title that you're working on, but it's about you as an artist and people wanting to be involved in the art that you're doing. This year it's Pistoleros. Next year it's Space Pirates. The year after that, it's, whatever it is, spelunking for beginners. Who knows? But it's going to be you as an artist, and you will be able to change those reward tiers year to year to reflect those different rewards that are, and those different titles that are being offered. It's going to be a lot easier for you to do that than it is for you to do set up a whole Patreon for something that's going to be done in a year, right? So if you're going to do a Patreon at all, I think you need to set it up and revolve it around you as a creator.
Right. And so just to clarify, one of the reasons why I set up Sheldon and Patreon, and one of the reasons why Brad and I set up ComicLab to all be separate Patreons, is we have no intention of ending any of those anytime soon.
Right.
Those are for the long haul, 5 years out, 10 years out, 15 years out, ideally 20, 25 years out, right? Like we're not ending those anytime soon. But in a situation like this, I think we can learn from and take instruction from musicians for whom every new album, every new track release, every EP, every LP, every short form album falls under the overall Patreon rubric of the creator, not the specific project. Because we all know musicians can have very different albums that change themes, change tones, change genres, change styles, much like we would do with comic projects. So, but it wouldn't make sense for that musician to set up their Patreon to be album specific, right? They're building an audience that says, hey, if you like what I do, let's make more of it. And yes, the next thing might be a little bit different. So I think in something like this, and in a career where you're doing a lot of little things, and we've had friends, Brad, that have had a career of a lot of little things, and we could name a couple of them right off the bat. But a creator specific and a creator focused Patreon seem to be the better option for those people.
Absolutely. And it's something that has a lot of flexibility, as long, because remember, you can always unpublish certain tiers. You can add any tiers at any point. You've got more flexibility than you might even really realize. So as your needs change, that Patreon can change. It really, it comes down to is how you're presenting that, how you're parsing that to your audience, and how you communicate those things as time goes forward, that's really the only difference. Everything else goes back to, the kind of Patreon 101 that we would want you to follow. But it really comes down to how you're communicating that with your backers.
And I think Brad's put the perfect button on that. So let me ask you, Brad, a question about this, because this is separate from this question, but it a little bit goes back to our first question asker, which is, we're all pining for the next stage in our career. Yeah. And do you ever pine for having a creator-specific Brad Geiger Patreon where you could do 5-page projects, 20-page projects, 30-page projects, and then the next 30-page project? Or because I'll be honest, I long to have kind of a mangaka system in my life where I have 2 or 3 employees and we're just cranking out fun stuff. Not all of which, I would love to do a short horror story. I would love to do a short sci-fi, a short Western, a short this or that. I don't know that I will ever do it, is the thing. But that's the thing that I'm pining for the next stage of my career. I don't know that it'll ever happen. I'm curious, do you ever pine for something like that?
Yes and no. I like my Patreon is set up to be, if you went on a sliding scale, I'm a little bit more towards the creator centric Patreon.
That's true. You do minis.
I do so many different things. I do Evil Ink. I do Evil Ink After Dark. Those are related, but they're very separate. Yes, I do a bonus cartoon. I do the commissions. So I do a lot of what I wouldn't consider a feature-based or a title-based or creation-based Patreon to be. So that's kind of why I probably don't have as much pining as you've got. But I'll tell you the actual honest-to-God truth. As you've heard for the last 2 episodes, my life is in such upheaval right now that what I'm pining for is normalcy, no changes, doing what I did last month. I'm what I daydream about is just doing Evil Ink and just doing After Dark and kind of just getting everything back to normal. Right now, that's my big daydream.
I can respect that. And also, well, 2 things. One, I want to say, as soon as you started to explain it, you're right. Yours actually is more of a creators-based Patreon than my intuition was just, it's an Evil Ink Patreon. But you're right. You do a bunch of small. Good on you as a friend that you do that.
Because if ever I wanted to launch something new, I could fit that into my Patreon super easy.
So you're right. Okay, so that's number 1. So one, good on you. I kind of misremembered the basic structure of your Patreon. You're right. You do that. Yeah. And number 2, I just want, almost like a proud uncle, I want to welcome the word normalcy to the English language. That was very well done. I think we're going to have great use of the word normalcy. Brad, looking for a little normalcy in his life. I cherish that, and I welcome that word to the English language.
Normalcy's not a word. Since when is normalcy isn't even a word?
I thought it was normalcy. Isn't it normalcy?
Normalcy? No, I think that we got to look this
up. Hold on. Now I'm doubting everything that I hold dear.
Normalcy. Normalcy.
It can't be normalcy. That can't be a word.
Google is even saying, do you mean normalcy? So yes, I think I just got my hat handed to me. I think it's normalcy. Listen, whatever it is, that means that things aren't surprising me anymore, and I don't have a bunch of boxes surrounding me. That's what I want.
Yeah, you know what your response to me can be on that one? Go to hell, Dave. I'm living in boxes. Go to hell.
Yes.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
So a quick update for everybody on the show. I'm very excited to announce that for patreon.com/SheldonComics, we have a new patron on board this week. It's Brad Geiger is now a patron of Sheldon Comics.
Yes. And no one was more surprised than Brad Geiger finding out that he was a Patreon backer of Sheldon Comics. And now I am 100% on board with the free trial, because let's talk about what happened.
So I had been talking to Brad about the free trial and how I'm a fan of it with Patreon. And just a quick update for those that might care about the numbers. I've had 16 people on Sheldon try it. 12 have now signed up with, so 4 have said no thanks. That's a 75% success rate. So far, the numbers are pretty small still, but it's been working great. Anyway, one of those people is Brad Geiger, because Brad and I wanted to see what the process was from the user standpoint when they signed up for a free trial, how it worked, what kind of messaging they got, what kind of communications they got. And Brad, why don't you tell them what happened when you got to day 7?
Yeah, it was really interesting, because I signed up again under the auspices of that advice that we gave on ProTips, that you should be interacting on Patreon as a research mode, right? To learn more, you should be a Patreon user as well as a Patreon creator, right?
Right.
So putting my money where my mouth is, I signed up for Dave's free trial. And it told me when I was going to get charged. It said, put your credit card information in now, and in 7 days, if you don't cancel, there was no chicanery. There was no surprises, except all of a sudden I get a bonjoro from Dave saying, what are you doing? Why are you signing? You were just testing out the free trial. And I had no idea that I was about to get charged, right? And Patreon sent me a receipt after the charge happened, so I could cancel my my membership after that. But it was on me to remember to cancel that free trial before my 7 days had elapsed. And of course, I wasn't paying any attention, because I was in it up to my eyeballs with moving. So I just got brought right into the system. And having seen that, now I am a big fan of the free trial, because that's exactly how every other subscription system works. That's how Netflix works. That's how Hulu works. That's how all of these streaming services work. They get you in with a free trial. And then when you're so happy with the service, you don't even notice that you're now a subscriber.
Yeah. And in fairness to Patreon, they do give you a fair notice, like, this is what's going to happen in 7 days. Unless you opt out, you are going to be. And so there's never lying, there's never subterfuge, there's never anything like that.
Right.
But like Brad said, I think one of the reasons why I've had a 75% success rate, again with small numbers, is that if someone is vaguely interested enough or vaguely a fan enough that they're willing to even sign up for it, then if it happens somewhat unbeknownst to them, the passive response is, yeah, this is fine. I did like it. I'm fine being a patron. That's fine. Like a lot of things in life, it's the active choice that stops a thing from happening, which is why so much of marketing works, because it's, hey, you've got your wallet open, and while you have your wallet open, why don't we do X, Y, Z? And then you find yourself spending $300 at Target rather than $50 at Target, right? That's what good marketing does, is it expands your expenditures. So in this moment, the passive action is, you know what, I am enjoying Sheldon, and I do like it. All right, you know what, this seems great. I'll stay as a patron. And again, I'm a fan of it. I recommend it.
Yeah, I'm now 100% on board with the Patreon free trial. I definitely will be incorporating that shortly. Just because having seen the way it works, it's definitely going to, in my estimation, it's going to do good things for your Patreon.
Well, Brad, I have one more update for this show, and it actually goes, again, back to the earlier question asker, because you talked about, like, look, you can either do two kinds of Patreon. You can have a huge generalized audience of which you capture 1% or less of the audience, or you can have a super niche, super passionate, super concentrated audience of a very hyper-specific topic, and then launch a Patreon that way. And one of the updates that I wanted to bring into the show this week is a quote from Jerry Garcia, who was the lead singer and guitarist for the Grateful Dead, which is not everybody's taste, right? In fact, oh my God, I didn't plan to bring this onto the show. This is a for real story that happened in my marriage this week. So we're riding in the car, the family and I, and a Grateful Dead song comes on the radio, and I turn it up because I actually like the Grateful Dead. Yeah. And my wife goes, "Can I be honest with you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "We've been married now, what, 20, 22 years, 23 years?" And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I lied to you when I said I also like the Grateful Dead." And I go, "What?" And she goes, "I just wanted you to smooch me. I hated the Grateful Dead. I can't stand the Grateful Dead. I never liked the Grateful Dead. Their songs go on too long. I never liked it." And my family was dying laughing because she's like, "I just wanted you to date me. I hated the Grateful Dead."
Oh my God. And it's taken 20 some years for the truth to come out, right?
This was a lie 23 years in the making. And then, we went through a whole long list of the things that we sort of semi-quietly lied about in order to get the other ones. Like, Gloria, I love live theater. Oh, I love going to live theater. There's nothing I wouldn't do more than going to live theater. I'd pay money to do it. Yes, please, sign me up.
Experimental dance? Sign me up. I want to watch that for hours.
Oh my God. Early in our marriage, we had a friend who's, they were in an experimental dance troupe, and I went, and Brad, I would have, like a fox with it stuck in a trap, I would have gnawed my own foot off to get out of it. Anyway, I'm now circling back onto this quote from Jerry Garcia. So Jerry Garcia, admittedly of a band that is not everyone's taste, really not everyone's taste, right? But this is a quote from him. He said, "Not everybody likes licorice, but the folks that do really like licorice."
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? I mean, and that says everything you want to say about like niche publishing and having a small but passionate audience. It's the absolute truth. And as one of those people that don't like licorice, or at least black licorice, I totally get that. But then my father-in-law, if there's black licorice in the house, he will knock people out of the way, making a beeline for it. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of for all of those of us who are doing a comic that we think no one else could possibly like this comic. Right. Exactly. Right? And sometimes the temptation is to do something that would be popular. I'm going to do a comic about video games, or I'm going to do a comic about this other demographic that's really really big right now. I can see, if we were back in the newspaper days right now, people doing comics where the kids are staying home with the parents long after college, and it's starting to become all those conflicts as the kids become young adults, and all those tensions that it raises. I could see somebody building a comic around that, because that's what's going to be happening more and more in this country as the economy keeps the way it's going. And I can see that, I can understand that, but unless your heart is really in that topic, you're never going to be able to write it as well as that one weird thing that you are hyper fixated on, that you're fascinated by, and you're like, nobody else could possibly like this story about toads in a swamp. But if you are hyper fixated on toads in a swamp, you're going to find out that there's a lot of other people like you, and they're so happy that you're doing, because nobody else is doing this thing that you and them like, and that's the makings of a small but passionate readership.
And that's why I got so excited. This was many months ago when we had a question asker write in talking about the comic that they wrote that was hyper specific towards ribbon gymnastics. I'm forgetting the phrase.
Yep. You're getting it right.
But anyway, it was that idea of gymnastics, but ascending and descending from a ribbon, that kind of thing. Anyway, I got so excited about that, but because who would guess, at least who of Dave Kellett would guess that could be a comic? But of course, for the thousands and tens of thousands and globally hundreds of thousands of people that might enjoy that sport or enjoy related sports, i.e. gymnastics, that can identify with a lot of the training and physical aspects of it and frustrations. That's a great example of Jerry Garcia saying, not everybody likes licorice, but the people that do go nuts for it. Because I might not necessarily like or do gymnastics, but the people that do, my God, they're going to go nuts. And I'll tell you what, even with somebody like me who doesn't like hockey, I loved Check Please because it was written with such passion and enjoyment of the sport that it rubs off on you, because ultimately as humans, we all just want to feel, and we do like to broaden our horizons. As much as I like to be an old grump about things, I do like to know what it's like to be into hockey, or I do like to know what it's like to be into ribbon gymnastics. You know, it's kind of, it's fun just to see someone be excited about a thing, and then to learn from it is even better. So what I'm getting at is this, again, this goes back to that Patreon answer that Brad gave about you can either have a broad general audience and tap in a percentage, or you can have a super passionate audience that's hyper specific and focused to the thing you do. And I will say that when Brad started Evil Inc. and when I started Drive, people were like, what is this? This is not, but we had a passion for it. And thank God we followed our hearts and kept going at it, because we found a like-minded tribe of folks that liked what we did.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it's a virtuous circle, because it just keeps feeding on itself. You're going to write your best stuff when it's something you're passionate about.
Yes.
And readers gravitate towards that passion. Right. So it just keeps building. So don't stop yourself from doing something because you don't think it's going to be popular. This is a good indication that it's time for you to start.
Well, let's jump into our next question over at patreon.com/ComicLab. This comes in from Mon, and she writes, "G'day, comics uncles." Oh, it's a g'day. What do you think, Brad? Where geographically, where do you think we're coming from with the g'day?
I think we're talking to somebody down under.
I think we are, and welcome to you. I'm going to say in August, I'm exhibiting at my first ever comic fair. It's not a Comic-Con or a huge convention. It's just a little indie comic fair in the middle of my city's main shopping district. Well, that's cool. Yeah. My friend who has exhibited at this event pre-COVID says that it was a 50-50 mix of intrigued passerbys and art comic fans. I think that's true, too, for something like this. Like having done TCAF, which is a non-ticketed event in Toronto, you do sort of get a 50-50. You get sort of like curious families and curious people like, hey, what is this thing? Yeah. And you get 50% that are like, oh, I can't wait to go see comics people. So, Mon, I'm just co-signing you on that. Two of the mandatory requirements for this comic event. Number one, no fan art. Number two, you must be selling at least one finished original comic. That's interesting. I've never seen that before. Anyway, I've got a comic that'll be done and printed and ready to sell before the date. I've got prints, original stickers, and a few other things in the works. I'm really excited for this event. I've listened to lots of your publicly available episodes about comic convention tips and tricks, and I wanted to know if you have any advice that leans more towards specifically small comic fairs where people don't have to pay for entry and might just be stumbling upon the fair. Cheers muchly from Mon. Brad, what kind of answer do we have for Mon about a smallish, free-ish comic convention where the audience might be 50% devoted to comics and 50% just passing by?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to hear what you have to say about this, Dave. I don't have any specific advice. I would say that everything that we've already said about comic conventions would hold true in this case. Yes. With the only caveat being that the crowds are going to be smaller and you're going to have to compensate for that a little bit. But but like all of the strategies that we've talked about with comic conventions, all of the pros that go along with a comic convention, and all of the cons that go along with exhibiting at a comic convention, I think are going to hold true here. In other words, when you get done with this, I want you to do the honest math and decide whether you want to do it again next year based on that. But as far as special rules for a small comic convention where some people might just be passing by, I don't know that I have anything super specific for that.
I'm trying to think of the times that I've done sort of a small, for lack of a better phrase, throwaway convention where it's like, I'm doing it. I'm not really planning for it. You know, but I will say this, no matter what convention or what appearance or what talk I've ever given in my career, I am always surprised that in that geographic location, there is 1, 2, or 10 super fans that come out, excitedly come out amongst this generalized audience that could kind of care less, you know, so always be prepared for the potential big sale that you might get that might surprise you at a small show for the 1, 2, 10, ideally 15, 20 super fans that come out to see you. Because I've been surprised sometimes, Brad, like you and I, back in the day when we used to exhibit together, we would do a smallish show and by God, someone who loved us would come out, you know?
Well, the closest that you and I exhibited at both to exactly what this question asker is talking about is NCS Fest in Huntington Beach, California. Remember that?
Yes.
That was exactly what Mon is talking about in terms of, it was a small show.
Yep.
There was a lot of people just wandering through, going to Huntington Beach. And some people had come up specifically for the NCS weekend. Okay. So that's kind of similar to that experience. And I'm thinking back on our experience there, and I don't know that I'm not going to be much help to you, because I think all of the standard convention things apply. I think I will. This is as far as I'd go in that. And that is, I think you need to give special attention to your flyer in a situation like that, knowing that you've got a better than 50-50 chance of the person walking by not even being a comics fan. I think you have to design your flyer in such a way that it not only introduces your comic, but really introduces the entire concept of what you're doing. In other words, that comic convention flyer has got to be aimed at a rank civilian, somebody that's not even into comics at all. And it's got to be prepared to onboard them somehow. And this is also where you take a page out of Dave's book, and this goes all the way back to the Webcomics Weekly days, and you have a flyer that's printed front and back, and one side of that flyer is designed to do one job, and the other side of that flyer is designed to do maybe a completely different job. And what you gauge that attendee as they walk up to the table, and you might hand it to them with side A up, or you might hand it to them side B up, depending on where your guess is as to how that person falls into a general category.
Yeah, I think emphasis on the flyer is a great suggestion. I will also say, and this is the more pessimistic tone for me, is that as excited as I am for you that you're doing this small convention and how fun it'll be and all that sort of stuff, and it's sort of fun to just be out in the public and no one's bought tickets, and it's just so you get a cross section of humanity. Like you'll get people like, oh, sci-fi, huh? You should do a sci-fi show, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But I will say, on a pessimistic take, be prepared to be underwhelmed by your sales. Like, don't mentally go into this going like, I really think there's going to be gangbusters. I really think I can do some magic with this. I mean, be prepared to be packing back up going, boy, I sure am packing up a lot of this stuff again that I brought to the show. Well, I made lunch, that kind of thing. I've had, over the course of the years, frankly, the NCS show was not a version of that for us. The beauty and the joy of that was hanging out with Brad and everybody else. I don't know that we made a tremendous amount of money on that one.
I didn't. I can tell you right off the bat, I did not. I shipped a lot of stuff home.
Yeah, I don't remember the numbers, but I remember being like, well, that was a weekend.
Yeah.
I actually remember one of my favorite parts of that weekend was that I bought the like the bucket of M&Ms at Costco, and we all went to town on them all weekend long, and that's the only thing I remember from that show.
And the Mark Trail guy was there. Did you get an original that weekend or not?
No, but I sure did enjoy that the Mark Trail guy was there. That made my heart giddy that the Mark Trail guy was there. That's the equivalent of like Ziggy being at the show. And Brad, you remember your favorite Ziggy from that's about comic conventions, don't you? I think you haven't put it up yet in the new studio, but I remember it being on your wall.
Well, it's buried over there somewhere among all my art. But it pretty much says it was Ziggy standing amongst all of these people that were all dressed up for the comic convention. And Ziggy said, I don't know whether this is a comic convention or group therapy. I'm Ziggy.
Can I ask you what? Because people will appreciate this. We didn't intend to talk about Ziggy again today, but what was the Ziggy joke that we had yesterday on the phone?
Oh my God,
that absolutely killed me, and I can't remember what it was.
It actually had to do with therapy, because it was if Ziggy went and saw a therapist and got control of his life, and all of a sudden, like, he would start to become a different person.
I remember. No, it wasn't this. It was that what would happen to Ziggy if the cartoonist started to successfully date. Do you remember?
Yeah, that's right. If the cartoonist suddenly had a dating life, Ziggy would start to get drawn differently.
Yeah, Ziggy like starts wearing pants. Ziggy
that's the
starts
first
going
indication.
to the gym. Ziggy starts going to the gym, starts eating right.
starts losing a little bit of weight. He starts to get taller and thinner.
Yeah.
You know, with the culmination is that he gets a nose job, right? To feel great about himself.
Nose job.
And then he's a completely different looking character. You know, he's getting close to Dick Tracy territory, right? And then we go, what happens next is that the cartoonist gets a divorce, right? And starts backsliding. And then Ziggy just starts to morph back into a Ziggy, except he's had his nose done, so his nose doesn't fit his face anymore.
That's right. That's what killed me, is that everything, the pants go back off again, the weight goes back on again with Ziggy. Yep. He buys a new bird, but it's still the old nose job.
So you've got the traditional Ziggy with the Dick Tracy nose.
With just this chiseled Tom Cruise Botox and filler nose, you know? Oh my God. It killed me. Yeah, there's like everything else has changed back to the old Ziggy except the nose is still there.
And somewhere along the line, the parrot died because he was so busy dating. Nobody was taking care of the parrot. Now he's got to get a new replacement parrot. Yeah, it was a whole Ziggy trilogy that we had worked out.
Anyway, well, thank you for sharing your favorite Ziggy from Comic-Cons, because I know everyone was excited to hear about your favorite Ziggy on the wall there. That was a great one. All right, well, let me jump us in with our last question, Brad, for the show this week. And this comes in from Jesse, who writes, "Hi, Dad and Brave. Longtime listener, first-time question asker. I have a webcomic I stopped working on for mental and physical health reasons in 2019 after I finished the 4th chapter. Thinking it would take a couple of weeks before I sat down to work on the second book for release in 2020. Everybody knows what happened in 2020. Oh, Jesse, we all know. Yes, of course. Fast forward 3 years later, we're in 2023. I have a full-time job as a lead storyboard artist in an animation studio. Wow, by the way, Jesse, good job. I love my job, but it does take a toll on my energy and creativity, which is what I hear from everybody in animation. They want to draw when they get home and they're just exhausted. I can still squeeze in an hour a day, or now 4 hours a week on Fridays, thanks to the studio I work at, to work on personal projects. My problem here is quite simple. With such little time to work on personal projects, I want to go back to work on the actual webcomic. I still have a lot on my plate with the story ahead, and I'm very excited to work on it to make my characters live their adventures and to eventually end it sooner rather than later. I still have many years of work ahead of me, but with 3 years in the dump, I really want to get back at it. Yeah. I have a book of the first 2 chapters, and I have all the material to actually do the second book. I still have to edit, run a Kickstarter campaign, go to the printer, get the books, put them on my online store and all that so that I can have a second book the fans have been asking for at conventions. What would you do, Brad, in this situation? Cave in to the desire to do the comics right, or to do the right thing and finish the book that's almost done so it's out of the way? I just need my comic dads to nudge me in the right way or hear you fight over this. Thanks for your amazing podcast. It really makes me want to do comics again. Jesse. Brad, what do you got for Jesse?
Oh, I've got news that's just going to break Jesse's heart, I think. Okay. Because the answer is...
Is it related to Ziggy dating?
And unfortunately, it's got nothing to do with Ziggy. But Jesse, the answer is you got to do both. And I'll tell you why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've got the first book that's chapters 1 and 2. And I'm just going to assume that the second book is chapters 3 and 4. We'll keep things nice and even. And you say you've got 3 and 4 done. And the question is, do I put out a book of 3 and 4, or do I start working on chapter 5 and putting it on the web, right? And if I understand your question correctly, and
I think that's right.
The answer is you got to do both, because if you expect to generate any amount of excitement or audience or attention to that Kickstarter for 3 and 4, you're going to need to start posting chapter 5. It's the only way you're going to get enough interest, enough eyeballs, enough reader interest, to enough patrons to go support that Kickstarter for 3 and 4 is if you start working on 5. If you're not working on anything substantial, unless Jesse, you really surprised me, and in this interim, you've been doing what I would call amazing social media. Like, you've really been keeping touch with your backers and your readers and all that stuff on social media, if you've done what I would call a Herculean level of social media, you might be able to pull it off. I'm not going to say you can't do it, but I will say that your best chances of success are going to come with restarting this comic and doing new pages and getting all of that on the way. And it means that the answer is that you don't, in my opinion, you don't get to choose between one or the other. If you want to do one, you got to do them both.
So what I hear you saying to Jesse is, if Jesse gets all the Kickstarter done, it's ready to go, but hasn't been building or rebuilding or re-exciting their audience, then that's like Ziggy having a nose job, but everything else is not ready to go. And like Ziggy just can't hit the dating scene. Like, put some pants on, Ziggy. Like, you got to eat right, Ziggy. You got to get some vegetables in there. You can't just rely on the nose job to get the work done. So, no, yes, I hear your point about this, and I as pained as I am to say it, Jesse, I kind of agree with Brad. Is that here's what probably has to happen. You're working on both of them over these 4-hour periods that you have each week, and it's going to take you a couple years to get that Kickstarter ready. But the benefit, to Brad's point, is by the time that Kickstarter is ready to launch, you've also been in those 4-hour periods or 1-hour periods doing the comic, such that the audience that was there and is there and will be there is now excited again because they've been seeing it on their radar. It's been coming across their social media feed. It's been coming across their MailChimp subscription, whatever you're sending it to them on. And so 2 years from now, 2.5 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, when you go to launch that Kickstarter, they're there for you, because how as joy-filled as the feeling is that you're feeling right now, the people are coming up to you in conventions going, I want that book. When's that book coming? It's a version of, it's not exactly, but it's a version of those people who are like, you got to make this a t-shirt, right? Right. Because that person will be there for you when you Kickstart. I guarantee you that's true. That person will be there for you. But you might not realize how much you've fallen off the radar of genuine fans, people that love you, people that want to support you. You've fallen off the radar with them. And you doing the regularly comic updates again will get you back on the radar, back to excitement about your work, and ready to Kickstart you in 2 or 3 years when you also have the book ready to go.
Yeah, and there are worse things than suspense. Right? There's worse things than anticipation. In other words, if you've got people coming up saying, when is that book 2 coming out? That's a good thing. And you can use that to your advantage, because your answer to them is soon, very soon. And I'm really excited to get it into your hands. In the meantime, have you seen what I've been doing with chapter 5? Right? And you stoke those flames. You keep things going. You don't ever tell somebody, well, I don't have time to do it. No. What you do is you say soon, and it's going to be great, and I can't wait, but the time's not right just yet. In the meantime, have you seen what I'm doing with chapter 5? And then you keep that excitement going. You keep that builds going. You keep it positive and upbeat, and I can't wait. And then when you are ready to go, you've got that person right on the precipice, ready to hit the button.
And here's the thing, Jesse, you're talking to two guys who get it. You're coming home from work. Your hand is tired. You're emotionally exhausted. You've been getting a bunch of notes on your storyboards. You've been cranking the turnarounds on them. I get it. Like, this is not going to be necessarily easy to do both new comics and in the background also be developing the Kickstarter and the book. But I think that future you will be happy that you did both a little bit slower, a little bit more balanced, a little bit more hesitantly, because you're not doing either one 100%, but doing them both over the next 2 years, 3 years, and then getting ready to launch that book with an audience that's got a little bit more energy behind it.
Yeah. And listen, having an audience with energy is very, very important. I can't stress that enough. having a couple of co-hosts that have run out of energies because they've been running their mouth for a solid hour. That's another thing, too. That's when one of those hosts have got to say that you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been Ziggy, who says, I got a nose job. It's the only job I'll get. Your hosts have been Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com. By the way, I just realized that joke could be read two ways. And Nelly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I was here for it. Dave Kellett works blue. This is wonderful. And my friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And don't forget to keep giving us those 5-star reviews over there on Spotify, where we are absolutely burning up the podcast charts.
And a reminder, I will say this again, do remind younger cartoonists who are focusing exclusively on webtoons, thinking that's the only way to make a career, let them know about Comic Lab. We do want to reach out to those folks and tell them there is another way, maybe a better way, to make a career online with comics. And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice, patreon.com/comiclab.
I'll tell you the worst thing, Dave, about being in this hoarder's nightmare that I find myself in the middle of. I need to, after this show, because I've got to get a lot of stuff done before I go to San Diego, I've got to plant myself in front of that Wacom and get a bunch of work done, but I can't find my 3-fingered glove. And I can't, my hand, it's hot in here. My hand's all sweaty. I can't do any work until I find that glove. And it's buried somewhere out there underneath 3 tons of boxes. And I have no idea where it is. I'd literally be better off just stopping everything and going out to buy a new glove.
Okay, a couple questions. A, where do you even buy a glove like that to cut off the fingers of?
I got mine on Amazon. It's a special. It's like it's not going to scratch up your screen. It's like a real soft, silky kind of material. Yeah, and it lets your hand slide across the screen. And I got mine on Amazon.
So I got to tell you, because you suggested that I get one once. I bought it, and it felt foreign to me. I didn't enjoy it.
So you just put your clammy, sweaty hand right on your Cintiq?
Well, I think maybe we've just learned a little bit about Brad's sweat glands that we didn't learn about Dave's sweat glands. I don't want to make any assumptions here, but I like how you described it. Clammy, sweaty, leaves a snail trail behind it. Just a hand that's just covered in barbecue sauce and just sweat. And why is that all over my Cintiq? I don't even know.